Hello and welcome to the GSU Grace podcast. Today I am interviewing Director Georgina Watson on permitted development rights, also known as Class Q, where agricultural buildings can be developed without the need for full planning permission. The GSU Grace podcast is for farmers, their advisors, and anyone with an interest in agriculture. So welcome, Georgina, to the podcast. Before we go any further, if you'd like to give a brief introduction for those who are listening.
I'm Georgina Watson. I am a director working out of the Burbridge and Driffield offices. I mainly specialise in agricultural tenancy advice and planning.
Excellent. Okay, so we were talking briefly before the podcast recording, and we were talking about permitted development rights, and I mentioned Class Q, and you said, oh, that's quite an oversimplification perhaps of permitted development rights. So if you want to give us kind of a broad overview of permitted development rights for agricultural buildings.
Okay, so we have permitted development rights and we have planning. So permitted development rights is one step removed from full planning, which is an assumption, a general assumption that the legislation allows your development to go ahead. It's permitted, subject to certain criteria, which is in the legislation, and notification to the council. So it's a really useful tool for farmers and landowners, but it can be quite restrictive as well. So we've got to look at it in the round with full planning. But there are different levels and different types of permitted development as well. So you've mentioned Class Q, but we also have Class A, which is for agricultural buildings mainly, or groundworks. And then we have Class R, which is deemed permitted use, that we can change an agricultural building into some form of commercial use. And then the Class Q, which is agricultural buildings currently to residential. So it's when you say permitted development, there's the assumption that it is generally permitted, but what we're talking about, so knowing what it is.
Okay. And so then a lot of farmers might be looking at these permitted development rights, or looking at their buildings and thinking, kind of what else can I do? They're going through the transition. Everybody's, potentially looking at a bit of diversification. So what is the opportunity then? Why are people, why are farmers looking at Class Q, permitted development rights in general? And what are the opportunities? What kind of projects might they be looking at?
So with the transition, which you mentioned, we have a lot of clients who are trying to gear up their business, their farming business. So Class A could be a prime example where they need more agricultural shed space. If they're wanting to maximise livestock numbers, if they're changing into contract farming, share farming, and they need more shed space for corn storage, drying facilities, etc. So we can look at Class A permitted development for them. We can look at businesses which are wanting to diversify. So we can say, well, we have these buildings, we don't really need them, but there's a lot of demand for storage, light industrial, etc. So we could potentially look at a use there, and that's bringing a different type of income onto the farm. And then, yes, we've got the Class Q, the residential element, which can provide for a worker. It can provide for a family member, or we have had cases where they've been, we've got some buildings on the edge of the farm, or you've got two steadings, but you don't necessarily need two steadings. So we can gear up one for the farming operations and look at redeveloping the other. And that can be then an injection of capital back into the farm if they want to gear up somewhere else. So it's knowing what the strategy of the client is going forwards to then work out how we can use planning, permitted developments or full planning, to work out the strategy of how we're going to get from A to B in the quickest possible time, because usually farmers want everything doing. I suppose you've got to, though, especially if it's a new shed, and within the farming calendar there'll be good times and bad times to be trying to
absolutely
so working out the strategy, the timeline, the costs, because again we've got to consider costs, and then any of the regulations that might need to follow with that application. So yeah, it's it's sitting down and working out what is the goal and then how we fit in that, rather than us saying you've got to do it this way. So that's how we try and plan it.
Because that's been quite a key part of, so we've got the Farm Business Advice service running, and the first part of it is that kind of half day of like getting to grips with the agricultural business and looking at the 5-year plan and doing the SWOT analysis. And it's actually quite a useful exercise, perhaps even for farmers, just to kind of, do on their own, just to kind of sit down and sort of have a think kind of strategically about what their end goal is. And that helps inform so many decisions, kind of even in planning as well. So
yeah, well, with the transition and under the FBAS service, we have done quite a lot of work where we've initially gone in for business restructuring or business planning. If there's other family members that we need to try and provide for longer term, or we've got the younger generation coming through, we've started on how the business is operating, how we need it to go forwards to meet all the family's objectives and goals and make it sustainable. And it can quickly lead on to planning and right, we need this, we need this, we need this. So I'd say on most farms, there is always an element of planning discussion one way or another.
Okay.
And whether they go down that route or not, that's their decision.
Yeah, it's something to kind of look at. Yeah. Okay, so then why would somebody go for permitted development over full planning? I mean, the obvious one is perhaps less costly and timeframes, but what are the pros and cons of kind of each one?
So I suppose the local plan, the local council's planning policy, that will have the overriding yes or no on full planning. And if it doesn't fit within planning policy, so a good example is under the permitted development class Q, there is an overriding policy that you can't develop dwellings in the open countryside. So this is almost like a backdoor in to be able to develop, say, housing, rural housing in rural areas that wouldn't otherwise meet planning policy. So if you went in with a full planning application, it would be a no, unless you can demonstrate that it meets some of those housing needs, or so it's a really tricky one. The same with commercial. So having commercial development in rural spaces doesn't always tick the box. But small scale, which the permitted development is, small scale can actually give the farming business an income. It can help develop that area as well with services. So it can be a real positive. And with the new rules that we can come on to, but obviously that is looking at other types of diversification for farmers to add value to products.
Yes.
So, and then with Class A, I suppose the plus with that is time. So permitted development is a 28-day notice, full planning's a minimum of 8 weeks. But also with the new BNG rules, so with full planning, an agricultural building, and we have had some cases which have been caught by the new BNG rules. So we've had to get reports done to show that they can mitigate.
Yeah.
And under PD rights, we don't currently need that. So there is a plus on that because it's, again, time, cost. So where we can, we would use Class A to essentially do a 28-day.
Yes.
There are quite a few rules and regulations around it and criteria that we have to meet. And again, that's why we look at the strategy, because again, if you were going to go for Class A, you would be barred from Class Q. So you've got to just be careful about which ones you want to use, when you want to use them.
And which one's going to be most advantageous
and which one is going to be. So yeah, there's pros and cons. We do have cases at the moment where we have a full planning application in for an agricultural shed, and we have gone down the BNG route. We've put the reports in, we've done the full application because we want to preserve the Class Q, and so that's happening. So again, yeah, we just need to.
Gosh, have we seen many farmers kind of get caught out with that?
Hopefully not with us. No, but they can.
Yeah.
And so it's looking at how we can still meet goals, but it might just mean extra cost with reports, and a longer time period.
Okay.
But I would say the housing one, that's the key one, which in local planning policy is where they're likely to say no.
Right.
If you can't get the Class Q route.
Okay, gosh, that's all really interesting. A question that I had was, can you apply for permitted development rights where the land is occupied under an agricultural tenancy, or is there any kind of restrictions like that?
So you can, but landlord and tenant both need to be on board with it, and within the application there'll be provisions where notices are served. Under Class Q and certain others, you can't serve notice to get the tenant out and then apply. There's a time restriction.
Right.
So it does try and protect the tenants as much as possible. But where a tenant is wanting to apply for a new shed or do something different, that doesn't bar them, because they would probably have to get landlord's consent anyway under their tenancy agreement.
Yeah.
So that mechanism is purely to try and protect the tenant from, landowners who are
maybe a bit unscrupulous.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And do we have any sort of really good examples of kind of where permitted development rights have worked kind of really well, or kind of any stories where, there have been kind of complications that have been unforeseen, or sort of any, warnings that we would give to people who are kind of thinking of going down this route?
So ones that have worked really well, we've had a lean-to farm building, which we applied for Class Q. I must admit, I didn't like the initial drawings. It did look a little bit,
Interesting.
It wasn't going to be a very nice residential dwelling. But we applied for semi-detached on this lean-to. We got that with basic drawings. We then went in for a pre-application with the council to say, come on, do you really want us to build this?
Yeah.
Or just look around. There's some really nice brick-built dwellings. Can we apply for full planning, but give justification of why triggering the Class Q wouldn't be the best route? But we've established we can have 2 dwellings there.
Okay.
So let's just concentrate on the design and how it fits with the area better, because under Class Q you don't have the ability to do that. You don't have the design. You have restrictions on design under Class Q, so you can't put your artistic flair on it. And they were very positive about the pre-app, so we went in for full planning and got 2 new brick-built dwellings. They were still semi-detached, but they were in keeping with the area. And again, we stuck with the same floor space, which was more than enough. But the design worked better than if we'd have just stuck with a Class Q. So I suppose that's working out how you can then use Class Q, but also use full planning to tidy it up into a nicer scheme. Class A, I suppose we use that a lot for just agricultural buildings. So if we need to, we do get farmers saying, well, I've already bought the steel, no pressure. So again, it's the timing. So we have, and with Class A, you can go, at the moment you have 1,000 square metres. That's going up to 1,500 square metres, which would be a really good tool. And every 2 years you get to reuse that. So it's a good way of developing a farmsteading and developing the buildings that you need quite quickly, cheaply, and effectively. I mean, there's certain sites which that isn't possible. But yeah, we do get a lot. And muck stores at the moment is a common one with all the grants that are going on. So we do get a lot of requests for planning applications where we're supporting the new water grants. And so they're always good ones, because you see it's an improvement as part of the funding. So.
Absolutely.
And then Class R, we've had ones where we've converted to cafes or just general storage, which has been a much needed income to help, with the farm business.
And that all depends on location quite a lot, doesn't it? Sort of if you're on a, kind of like a good motorway route, or if you're like, near a big residential area for the kind of cafe and things, it's all the different options for diversification. So there's so much you can do.
Yes.
But it's got to be in the right place.
Location is key. because, like I said, protected landscape areas, so AONBs, national parks, you don't have the same kind of permitted development rights as you do, say for the Vale of York, or so it can be area specific, and that is just to protect the landscape and the visuals as much as possible. So you do have to be careful with
location.
Yeah.
And so then you mentioned that the size for, oh gosh, I'm going to get mixed up with my designations, but it was the Class A? So you're going from 1,000 to 1,500. That's with the kind of the new regulations that are kind of coming through the legislative update. Kind of what were your thoughts on the new provisions coming through, and kind of what impact do you think they might have?
So Class A, I think it's positive because we're going from 1,000 to 1,500 square meters, and what farmer doesn't like building the biggest shed they possibly can. So, and in terms of scale for farm businesses now, they need to be operating on a scale. So it really helps. And it just means that we can get those applications through a lot quicker for the farmer. So I think generally Class A is quite positive. Class R is quite positive, as in it's opening up the use classes that you can then use these buildings for. Class Q, it's mixed. There'll be pros and cons to it. So at the moment you have 465 square meters for any single dwelling up to 3. And that's been reduced to 150. So it's a big reduction in the floor space per dwelling. But then you can, instead of having 5 dwellings up to 865, it's 10 dwellings to 1,000 square meters in one scheme. So whilst the smaller restrictions are now coming, it will open up certain sites and it will close down sites. But we're still getting to grips with the pros and cons of each one. And I think each site that we look at, there's going to be so much we need to consider. It's going to be very different for each one, that we're going to have to be saying, well, this works, but this doesn't. So it might almost be, again, like we've done before, where it's a stepping stone to where we want to get to. And then there's a few issues around purchase and sale of sites as well. So how long the agricultural unit has had that asset that you're then wanting to change into Class Q is 10 years. So there's going to be pitfalls for some people who are purchasing, potential pitfalls where some people are purchasing buildings with the thought that they can claim for Class Q, which they might not be able to. But then on the other side of that, we've got right at the back of the legislation a paragraph on transition provisions, which is saying that we have up to 2025 for the transition provisions. But how councils are going to apply that, or what the leeway is between the old Class Q and the new Class Q provisions, I think it's going to come down to the council and how they interpret that and how they apply it within the next couple of months. So we will see probably after May 24, 21st of May 24, when the legislation kicks in, how they're going to apply it. But time will tell us. We're still continuing applications under the old provisions because we've planned for those. And I don't see the new provisions helping any of our existing applications. So I'm not putting the brakes on any of them. And there's a couple where I'm saying, well, we'll carry on and we'll still, even if it might be after the 21st of May 24.
We'll still be able to use the framework.
But like I said, I have this niggle that it will come to the council and how they say we have to put these applications in and what we're required to do.
And understanding the nuance with the different councils and probably having good relationships with the planners as well.
Very much so, And you start to, when you work with the councils and the planning offices, you start to know what you, not necessarily what you can get away with, but what you need to provide, and what is like that's a deal breaker versus that isn't, but we can deal with it and we can see what we can do in terms of additional reports, etc., just to support the application. So it's a mixed bag. It's still quite new, and I do think there's a rush for everyone to say, oh, it's changing, and it will, but I don't think we need to
It's not panic stations quite yet.
No, not. But I think, like I said, the ones that we've got, we're still pushing through, and ideally, we have pushed through a few quickly just to get them.
Yeah.
So there's no ambiguity.
Absolutely. Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to add? Is there anything that I've not mentioned, or anything people really need to know about permitted development?
All I would say with permitted development is it's a great tool if it's used correctly.
Okay.
And getting advice early on is key to work out your strategy. And you can't look at planning in the short term. Don't just focus on the one planning application. If you've got big ideas, if you're wanting to expand, redevelop, even a purchase and sale, and there's some planning potential involved with it, is to get the advice early, because if you put in an application and it gets triggered, it can prevent you from doing other things in the future. So before, I feel planning used to be more straightforward, as in you would just put an application in and carry on, keep going. Whereas now we need to have a plan and work out what to do, when to do it, and which things to spend time and money on which things we don't.
Okay. So get good advice early, and it'll save you a whole host of problems later down the line.
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Georgina. That's been absolutely fascinating. I have learned a lot. I thought it was a lot more straightforward than that. I think one of the key takeaways for me, as sort of BNG starts to become a requirement that's affecting more and more developments, it's really interesting that permitted development negates the need for that. So that'll be maybe something for people to sort of take on board. Thank you very much to you all for joining us. Next time on the podcast, we will be talking about countryside stewardship with farm business consultant Hannah Proctor. I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you very much.